Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third webinar in this series.
Yep, third webinar.
We are talking today about the state of Texas and how the U.S. Census that's happening this year is going to affect us. Due to a scheduled safety event on the Trinity River and Connect campuses, we did have to pre-record this, but the link for a credit will be up and it'll stay up for 48 hours like usual. I just want to let you guys know that if you type questions in, we're not physically live here to answer them for you today.
Right.
So today the presenters are...
I'm Angela Thurman. I teach economics here at the Connect campus, both macro and micro.
And I'm Misty Wilson-Mertens. I teach history and I'm the department chair of social sciences.
So, Misty, what is the census?
So a census just really basically is a count of our population. Who lives here? Where do they live? This has been going on since the Romans. So if you're familiar with the Christmas story,
Yes.
the reason that Joseph and Mary are in Bethlehem is to take a census.
Ah, okay.
So ours is a little different because not only is it used for taxation, which is the kind of historical use for a census, ours is also used for representation. We'll talk about that here in a minute.
Okay.
Our census is mandated by the Constitution in Article 1, Section 2, and we do it every 10 years. So every time there's a year that ends in 0, we're going to have a census.
Okay, so when did we start doing the census?
The first census was in 1790.
So why do we do a census? I get that we need to know how many people there are living in our country, living in our states, living in our cities, but why is this information so important? Can't we just sort of guesstimate?
We could do that.
Okay.
But we would lose a lot of data that way.
Okay.
So the reason we do a census and what makes the American census a little different is, yes, we do use the census for taxation purposes, but we also use it to allocate our congressional seats and our electoral college votes. We use it to define our legislature districts, so like the Texas districts, and then also our representational districts when we get to representatives. School districts are another important thing that we have to do here. We're going to get funding from the federal government based on the number of people we have and where they're living.
Okay.
So money for our roads, for our schools, all that great stuff. For researchers like ourselves, the census is always a great place to find a bunch of data.
Okay.
Especially for historians. And if you're somebody who likes to research your family history, a census may also be a good place for you to get some data from, so you can follow your ancestors back.
Okay. Although I do see the census data is not immediately available for the public. Is that correct?
It's not. We hold it for 72 years.
Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of reasons you want to do that. Primarily financial scams.
Okay.
So it's protecting you. The federal government has your data, but it's not publicly available for 72 years. Okay. So the most recent data that's publicly available is 1940.
Right.
And then in a couple of years, we're going to get the 1950 data, 2022, I think. The 1950 data comes out.
All right. So who gets counted in a census, or at least in our census in the United States?
So theoretically, absolutely everyone from a day-old infant to a 110-year-old person should be counted. Absolutely everyone should be counted. However, in the real world, the census is political.
Okay.
It's always been political. So what you're seeing here in this picture is a census. This is what the data looks like from 1830. And in this era, we only counted the heads of households.
Okay, all the heads of households?
So all of these names that you're seeing on the side are heads of households. These are white land-owning males.
Okay, so only white head of household.
And everyone else is a check mark.
Ah.
So this is why I said it's sometimes good to use data from a census if you're looking at your family history, because some people, like women, are harder to follow back.
Yes.
Because we represent just check marks on this census.
Well, let me ask you this. So this is everyone just in the 50 states, correct?
And the territories.
Ah.
Now, from this era, of course, we're talking about a much smaller geographic space.
Well, wait, when you say the territories, what do you mean?
Well, Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico gets counted in our census?
Yes.
Huh. Okay, but technically, they're not citizens, are they?
Well, yes.
Oh, they are?
Yes.
Okay. So Puerto Ricans are citizens of the United States.
Yes.
And they're also citizens of Puerto Rico.
Yes, the same way that we're citizens of Texas, but we're also citizens of the United States.
Okay, so Puerto Rico is basically like a state.
Yes, it's a territory, so it's similar. All right, so something else you're looking at in who gets counted is that there are a bunch of groups that are hard to count.
Okay.
So what you're seeing here is groups that are difficult to count. The
Like
darker
what?
shaded it is, the harder it is to count.
Okay.
So immigrant communities, very, very, very rural communities, transient communities, homeless populations, all of those people are difficult to count. Because what the census is trying to do is get a snapshot of our country, what it looks like on census day.
On a moment in time.
Yes. But if you can imagine just trying to count the people that are in this building,
True. With people
that gets
coming
difficult.
and going. Well, let me ask you this. Why is it so difficult to count, for example, immigrant communities?
So there's a lot of reasons for that. Language barriers are one,
Okay.
because it's almost impossible to print the census in every variation of every language.
All right.
There is historically some concern in some communities about filling it out, because if they're not documented, why do I want to tell the government where I live and who I am?
Okay.
But we'll get to that here in a minute,
Okay.
because all of those are valid concerns and things we should probably talk about. And then the other thing that we need to keep in mind is that some populations historically have been undercounted or just ignored altogether.
All right.
So in the early era of our census, 1790 to 1860, really, we didn't count Native Americans. We
Really?
just didn't count them. For the early part of our country until the Civil War, slaves are counted as 3/5 a person for taxation and for representation.
Explain that 3/5 to me.
So this was a compromise between our founding fathers. The South wanted to have it both ways. They want the slaves to count when it comes to determining representation.
Right.
They don't want the slaves to count when it comes to population for
Okay.
taxation purposes.
Got it.
So they want the representation, they don't want to pay the taxes.
Okay.
The North says that's not going to work, you can't have it both ways. So the compromise was 3/5. And the reason they came to 3/5, it's not that you're 3/5 a person, it's that you have 60% of the incentive to be a productive laborer as a free person.
Right. Right.
So if I'm a free person of any color, I have an incentive to wake up in the morning, work really hard, save my money so that I
Yeah.
can advance in life.
Sure.
A slave doesn't have that same incentive. Why would you work the hardest you can work?
You don't get anything out
You're
of
not
it.
getting anything from your
Right.
work. So the founding fathers thought slaves were 60% as motivated to work as a free person.
Okay, I've always wondered about that. So that is why they are 3/5 of a person.
Right. And then we also have some populations that are counted in ways that don't reflect lived reality.
Okay.
So what we're saying there is, think about things like prisons.
Oh, okay.
So if somebody is in jail, in prison,
Right.
during the census, they're counted at that location at that time. But if they're not in prison for a long time, let's say it's only a 2 or 3 year term,
Mm-hmm.
then really that's a person that should have been counted back in their hometown.
Right.
Because when we're allocating representation and federal funds,
They're going to go back there.
they're going to go back to their hometown. They're using the roads there and the schools there and the hospitals, so on and so forth.
Okay.
So-
I see that.
There are some tricky things here with who gets counted, where they get counted, how they get counted. But for most of us, those aren't major concerns.
Okay. So what information gets collected? Because I know a lot of people get nervous about answering a lot of really personal questions that they don't really feel like the government needs to know.
So the first few census that we did only asked like 6 questions.
Okay.
Basically, what is your name? Where do you live? How many people are in your household? What is the land value worth? What is your home worth? That's
Okay.
pretty much it. Later, the government started realizing, if we're doing a census, if we're spending the money on it, if we're using the manpower, we can probably get some more data out of our citizens. So what you're seeing on the screen right now is a snapshot of the 1940 census.
All right.
So this is coming out of the Great Depression. So not only are we asking you who you are, where you live, how many people are in your household, we're also asking you if you've been out of work, if you have worked for a government agency like the WPA, the Works Progress Administration. We're trying to see here how many people are still in the depression at this point, and how many people have started to come out of it. We also are going to gather some social data later on in the 50s and 60s. The last census we did, the 2010 one,
Mm-hmm.
had I think 56 questions on it, which
Wow.
is too much.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Because people got about halfway through it and they said, I'm done.
Yeah,
I'm not answering
yeah.
all these questions. So the one this year will be less.
So the questions change
Yes.
Depending on what the government deems is important, need to know information.
Yes, and there are some, again, debates about this every time we're going to get a new census. So there's a debate this year about if we should have included somebody who's transgender, if we should be collecting that data. And there's arguments on both sides for and against. But basically, this is a way for the government to get as much information about its citizens in a one-time, one-go snapshot as we possibly can.
Right.
But like I said, this one this year is shorter than the ones in the last 20 or so years.
That's good to know.
Now, this is something I thought maybe you could chime in with, Angela,
Okay.
since you teach economics, and my interpretation of it would be very, very, very poor. But what, aside from this demographic data, do we do with the census?
Okay, so businesses have access to the information gathered in the census, the broad information, and companies will use this information to decide where, for example, to locate a warehouse versus a headquarter, or where to market certain products. So if there is an area where it looks like, for example, Dallas is sort of known to be a young professional hub. All right, so that would mean like 25 to 40. So if Amazon was looking to hire a bunch of young professionals, that would be a great place to look, as opposed to somewhere where perhaps the population is trending older. They wouldn't want to go into that type of a neighborhood. In addition, they want to put their marketing dollars to use in the best way. So if they're going to be marketing to maybe families with young children, that is a thing that they need to look at. So they're going to be looking at where the people are that they want to hire, and it may be blue collar workers, right? If it's some sort of a manufacturing facility, maybe they want to go somewhere where the land is cheaper because there's going to be a lot of blue collar workers that they can hire. So this data is used not only by the government, but it is also used by businesses. And it's very important that the data be right, because we want the right businesses to come to our towns.
So if the data shows that there's a city that's beginning to gain population, that might be a place you want to locate.
Absolutely.
But if there's a place that's losing population,
probably not, unless that might be somewhere where you might want to put a warehouse. If it's, for example, in 2018, El Paso thought it was in the running for Amazon's second headquarters, but Amazon ended up pulling out because they didn't know if there was enough workforce base in the region. So that is an area where either the population wasn't enough, or it was the right type of population that would provide enough workers for Amazon. So they could look at a place and they could say, all we need is we want warehouse space. So if you want warehouse space, you don't need a lot of highly skilled workers, but you do need access to infrastructure like the railroads and the highways. So you'd want to go somewhere where you could get cheap land and a lot of unskilled labor.
That makes sense. So in Texas, I think this is really important data to look at. Our population, as everybody knows, if you drive on our highways, is growing.
Absolutely.
At an incredibly rapid pace. If you just look from 1960 to what we project it to be today, we have almost tripled our population.
It's amazing.
With that kind of growth, it really becomes important that we do count everybody, because we have to have the infrastructure in place.
Right.
To respond to all of the needs of those people. If it's not there and we're growing so rapidly, we're going to run into some problems.
Yeah, with schools, with hospitals, with highways, with public transportation.
Exactly. Our projection this year is that we're going to have over 29 million people in Texas.
Wow.
And a lot of those people are immigrating, of course, from other countries, but also from other states. So like California is actually projected to lose population this year while we're gaining it. So that brings us to
Texas troubles. So when you say Texas troubles, what could you possibly mean? Because we're the best state in the union.
Well, obviously. But this census is going to be challenging for us.
Why?
So our state government decided not to contribute money to the U.S. Census. States have the option, if they want to spend their own resources to support the census and try to get every single person counted, or if they don't want to do that. Our state decided not to do that. If we kind of look at a California comparison here, California and New York are actually both spending more than $100 million, all of their people counted.
So why are we not?
So one of the reasons we're not is that Texas is a little bit more conservative with our money.
Okay.
We don't necessarily see this as required spending.
Okay.
But we're also hoping that people in the private sector and some non-governmental agencies, local governments, will step up.
Okay.
And they'll provide that money to get people counted. And that's absolutely happening. You can go find all of these websites from cities. Frisco is one of them.
Right.
That's almost doing like their own little census because they want to make sure every single person is counted.
Okay. So if that's the case, then that might be a smart decision.
It could be, but
it could not be.
It could not be. So our state has over 25% of Texans that are considered hard to count. These are people that live in immigrant communities or Spanish-speaking communities. These are also the homeless and people who are in prison populations. 25% of Texans fall into one of those groups.
Wow.
If we lose even 1% of our population, that can cost us $300 million annually.
So what does that mean? What's our take home from that? If we lose that money, what is the effect on me?
So in 2010, we know that we undercounted about 250,000 Texans.
Okay.
There were 230,000 Texans that were, for whatever reason, not counted, not included. That means less money for Medicare. It means fewer Head Start classrooms. It means that our financial assistance programs for elderly to pay their electric bills, we just don't have it.
Right. So if I'm thinking about this, what this means to me personally is if my grandparents can't afford to pay their electric bill in the middle of the summer when it's 110 degrees, they could conceivably die. Right? They could have a heat stroke.
Worst case scenario.
Worst case scenario, but that is a possibility. Or if I had my kids in a Head Start program and I was getting funding to do that, that funding could be cut off.
Exactly.
Right? Or maybe there would not be a new,
or a new program will be created.
Exactly. In my neighborhood so it sounds to me, Misty, like the people that need these federal programs the most are the very people that are the most likely to not participate.
Or do not be asked to participate.
Because they can't be located?
Yes.
Well, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Is this something that can now be done online?
For the first time ever, yes. This year you can fill it out online. Not yet. Can't fill it out yet. It's not active yet. I looked last night, but soon. April 1st, it should be active. The other thing I want to point out is that this also, if we are not counting every single person, could mean that we as a state lose political power.
How so?
So the estimates are right now that if we counted all 29 million people, we might gain 3 House of Representative seats.
Wow.
That's a big gain.
That is a big
California is going to lose 1.
Okay.
That's why they're making an effort to count every single person because they're trying to onto it.
Okay.
So a House of Representative seat is a big deal.
Right.
It gives us a little bit more sway in the lower house in Congress.
Okay.
It offers more electoral college votes. So in a presidential election, not this time because it's too soon, but next time that'll be a big deal. Texas becomes more powerful.
All right.
It also means we're going to have to redraw our districts for our state legislatures.
And when you say we,
the state as a whole, not me and you.
Right.
But the state as a whole is going to have to redraw those districts.
Based on the results of the census.
Yes. And the idea is that all the districts should have relatively the same amount of people in them.
Okay.
So knowing where people are is really, really critical to know how to draw the district lines.
Right. So if you want to be represented not only locally, not only statewide, but on a federal basis,
it's really important
to be counted.
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's good to know. I didn't realize that it was that important.
So let's talk about how you get counted.
How do you get counted? Okay, I already heard that you said that you can go online, but you said not yet.
Not yet. It's not active yet. So in the olden days, literally this would be somebody showing up at your house with a clipboard, just writing this information down, handwriting it, who's here, what they're doing. Because we're asking more questions and because this data is trying to be a little bit more accurate than just a head count. Now you can view it by phone, on a paper, almost like a ballot looking thing,
Okay.
or online.
All right. Online, by phone, or by mail.
Now, the first 5 or 6 questions, they're basically asking you the same thing in a couple of different ways just to make sure your answers are correct. So it's a variation of who lives here and how many people.
Okay. Now, are they going to ask what my citizen status is?
No. So that was a debate in this past year. The Supreme Court decided that that is not a question that we're going to ask on the census because really it doesn't matter.
Okay.
The census is not counting citizens, it's counting who lives in a community.
Because whether I'm a citizen or not, I'm still using
The
resources.
roads, the schools, the
Exactly.
hospitals, exactly.
But can the government use the information that I provide in some way come back at me for anything?
So what the
Like
Supreme
if
Court
I'm-
has
yeah.
said is that census data cannot be shared with law enforcement.
Okay.
So this can't be used to hold you accountable for a
Anything.
crime.
So,
Yeah.
So it's totally private is what you're telling me.
I'm not telling you it's totally private because the government is going to look at it.
But I mean, they're not going to come back and say.
But we're not looking for you, Angela, individually in the
Okay.
census.
Like if I'm an illegal immigrant, they're
Scratch
not
that.
going to. Okay. So that's.
So say undocumented and simply.
Oh, okay. So let's do that again. So if I am in this state and I'm undocumented
Mhm.
and I fill this out, is there any possibility that they're going to come back at a later date
No.
and say, okay, so I'm totally safe? So what about non-citizens? That would be me again.
Same thing.
Same thing.
Yes.
So there's not any type of a
Penalty.
for answering.
No.
All right. So I'm okay to answer if I'm here undocumented. I'm okay to answer if I am a citizen of another country. I'm okay to answer if I have done something for which I'm not proud. Right. If I've got like 20
So it will
outstanding
not be
traffic
shared
tickets.
with law enforcement.
Okay.
Something else to keep in mind is, and again, this doesn't cover obviously every language,
Right.
but we now offer the census in 13 languages: English, Spanish, Chinese, Vietnamese, Korean, Russian, Arabic, Tagalog, Polish, French, Haitian, Portuguese, and Japanese.
Wow.
So that's a good chunk of our population, although I know that we are missing a few.
Okay. So what I hear you telling me is that there's no reason for me not to fill this out, but there's every reason for me to fill it out.
Yes.
I do have concern though.
Sure.
There's so many scams going on.
Yes, and this is actually a huge problem right now.
Okay.
So if you get a phone call and somebody says, I'm from the Census Bureau and I just am conducting my survey and I'm trying to count everybody, but to count you, I need your social security number.
Oh, absolutely. Here it is.
Don't ever do that.
Oh, no?
No.
I should never give out my social security number over the phone.
Absolutely not.
All right. What about if they tell me that it would be processed quicker with a small donation?
Please don't do that either. Those are scams, and they're very, very common, especially because there's such a push to get everyone to complete this. So I think I'm doing my duty as a good citizen. I'm answering these questions. Somebody asked for these things. It's a scam.
All right.
The Census Bureau is not going to ask you for the phone number, for your social security number, and they're not going to ask you for any bank account information.
Okay.
And they're also not calling you to take donations.
Got it. Are they going to ask me like how I voted or anything like that?
That information is not included on the census.
Okay.
So they might ask you what your occupation is, just so we can see what a population in a city looks like.
Right.
Again, like you were saying, young professionals
Right.
or more factory workers. But it shouldn't be anything that is so personal that you feel uncomfortable giving it.
Right. Okay.
And if you start asking those questions, I would hang up. It's just me personally. I would hang up.
Right. Or get caller ID.
Yes.
Even better. All right.
So I think this is something really interesting. The Census Bureau has put graphics. That's where I got this one from. And they're asking people to put these graphics on social media to pledge to take the census.
Shape your future.
I think it's a really interesting way to do this. I don't know how effective this is going to be. I don't know how viral this is going to go.
I don't know. Are you doing it on yours?
I'm not.
You're not.
I'm not. I don't really do social media. But if you want to share this, feel free. Go on the Census Bureau website. You can find more information at 2020census.gov.
All right.
We want to make sure every single person is counted. This is really, really critical. And also for our local economy, this is really, really critical.
It is. It is very important. No matter where you live, wherever you are and you're listening to this, you need to be counted, because the number of people in your community is going to determine the amount of money that your community gets from the federal government. So the more people that are counted, the more money that is going to your community.
And I know the question that you guys all really have is how you get credit for watching this webinar and what webinars we have in the future.
Woo-hoo!
So
this is our third one.
This is our third one. So I think Angie has the next one, which is going to be first-time voters.
Yes.
Talking about what is interesting to first-time voters and what they are invested in, what issues they care about.
Yep.
Our English professor will be taking candidate coverage on April 8th to discuss how the media is portraying certain candidates and what biases we can look for.
Okay.
And then I'm going to be taking the one on the 29th for One Nation. Are we really as divided as we seem? Because if you watch the nightly news, you would all at each other's throats.
You would.
All the time.
Yes, you would. And so now for people to get credit for this one,
in the description of the video, there is going to be a link. Click on that link, fill out the entire survey. That is how you get credit for watching this. The link is active for 48 hours. So this is going up. Again, I'm sorry, not live, but it's going up on Wednesday afternoon. So the link will be live until Friday at 5 o'clock.
Perfect. All right. Well, that was very informative.
On that little survey you guys are going to get, there is a spot to ask us questions. If you do have questions, I promise you, we read those surveys. We can respond and answer your question.
Or you can also, you can email any of us, or you can email your own instructor with questions.
All right. Thanks, guys, for watching. We appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.